The second teacher that I decided to interview for my interviews was with Dr. Jim Johnson, who is the professor of trumpet here at K-State. He also teaches high brass techniques, which is a class for music educators. I would say that he's the professor that I see on the most regular basis here at K-State. He teaches our lessons, which are a key component of our music education degree, and we have trumpet ensemble and studio with him, so we see him generally 3 to 4 times a week. So he's the professor I see on the most regular basis. And he decided that he wanted to teach because he wanted to change the world. Simply put, he felt that teaching was the best way that he could do that. And he chose to teach at the college level because he believes it allows for the most impact on the world, because you're teaching those who are going to go out and further change the world, so that it's somewhat of a cycle. And that's why he wanted to teach at the collegiate level. He also said that he didn't feel that he resonated as well with younger children, and so that's why he decided to continue on to his master's and to his doctoral degree in music performance, so that he could specifically teach trumpet. As a future teacher, I would really like to be able to resonate with all levels. I know that I've had a lot of experience working with elementary and middle school age students, as well as my experiences with leadership in high school, but when I go into the teaching field, I want my philosophy to be one that is inclusive of all ages of students. I realize that I may have inclinations to teach better to a certain group, but I don't ever want to put one out of a possibility. I want to be able to teach to all students. The values that he has as a teacher is to practice what he preaches, because he realizes that students can smell a hypocrite from a mile away, and he's never going to ask his students to do something that either he doesn't do or he wouldn't do as a player or as a teacher. He believes in teaching people, not music. He's very focused on using music as a vessel to teach people, but ultimately his goal is to make better people who will go change the world by teaching trumpet here at K-State. And I would definitely agree with that, and that strongly aligns with my philosophy that music is a vehicle or a vessel for making our students better people and ones that will make a positive impact on the world. I also agree with practicing with what you preach very strongly, because I've seen too many instances where either teachers or classmates don't do this, and it can be very frustrating. And being in the position of a student, it would be very hard to be motivated to learn in that class if you knew that the teacher wasn't willing to either give their best effort or do the things that they're asking you to do. As far as community goes, Dr. Johnson creates a community of learners within the trumpet studio at K-State by creating an environment of self-discovery. He often sees himself as a coach in addition to being a teacher, that he's giving students the opportunities to grow as individuals and discover their talents or the things that they are successful at, and believes in cultivating thinking that leads to self-discovery, so encouraging students to think critically and to be willing to go outside of their comfort zones to find things that they're either interested in or good at. And I think that self-discovery is a key component to include in music education, and something that I would like to teach with, to help students find those things that they are interested in through music and be someone who can encourage them along their journey to find that. As far as expectation goes, he expects students to put forth their best effort, not to strive for perfection, and believes that by striving to reach your best effort and to realize where you are as a student is very important in that process of self-discovery, and to not demand perfection, because music is something too often that has perfectionism lingering around it, and he wants to help try to get away from this. I would also agree with this. This is a key component in the research that I've done as far as music performance anxiety goes, which I will definitely carry with me into my teaching, and moving away from perfectionism and encouraging failure and encouraging students to grow, really taking on that growth mindset. And I see that here in his philosophy and want to see it in mine as well. If there are ever disruptions in the studio, because he doesn't have necessarily a classroom environment, the disruptions that occur are usually between one or two students and can arise from frustration or things that are going on. And so he believes in diffusing situations and moving past them in the moment, and then having students explain the situations outside of the problem situation. So talking to them later about why did this happen and what was wrong or right about how you responded and what do we need to do to change it. And I believe that that's a very effective technique of kind of removing the tension from the moment and then being able to talk to students when they have a clear head. And if ever there was an instance in my future classroom, I feel that that's the best way to handle a situation, to separate the two students, remove them from the situation, allow them to calm down, and then be willing to have that conversation when they have a more level head. He realizes that in moments when there are disagreements, there's never one right or wrong, but both individuals have fault and both have reason for why they were upset. And so having those discussions helps you realize where the student is coming from and what may have caused it. Very similar to Dr. Gergel's philosophy that she explained, that you never want to take away a student's dignity, and you have to understand that a lot of things are probably factoring into a reason that they got upset and caused the disruption. As far as assessment goes, Dr. Johnson uses lessons as a key way to assess where a student is at, and he assesses various aspects depending on the exercise that a student is practicing or has been working on. And this is very specific to trumpet, that he sees where they are on a certain exercise, whether it be producing a good tone or articulation, and then analyzes that and adjusts his teaching based on the difficulties that the student is still facing. And he addresses those by providing more exercises or other techniques that the student can work on to help them overcome the difficulties and grow through their trumpet playing. And I feel that this is especially important in music education, is being able to have one-on-one interactions with students and developing assessments that give you that one-on-one time to work with them, but so much that the student doesn't see it like as a test, because then they may not reflect their best efforts because of nerves or because of a testing situation. And so through my philosophy and through my teaching courses, I'd like to develop a method to do that I can take into my classroom, and learning from other teachers about how they assess on a one-on-one basis, especially in a larger band. This is something that I want to include and continue to discover. We then went on to talk about inclusiveness and culturally responsive pedagogy. Dr. Johnson's approach is that music is music, and he sees students as individuals without much of their background. When he thought about diverse learners, he thought more so about their educational upbringing and the environment that they were in and how that affects them here. So, for example, if a student came to K-State to take lessons and study music and had taken lessons in the past with another professor compared to maybe a student who's from a more rural area that didn't have that opportunity, he sees that as diverse learners. And treating people different depending on the intensity that he has in their lessons. So if he realizes that one student is not as advanced as another coming into K-State, he adjusts his expectations and his level of intensity with that student and expects everyone to meet the bar. That if they don't meet the bar, they don't get in and they don't study at K-State. Personally, I think Dr. Johnson's philosophy is lacking in culturally relevant pedagogy, and I think it's simply lacking from understanding. He doesn't necessarily take a color-blind approach, but maybe takes a culture-blind approach from my interactions with him, is that he more so doesn't see it and doesn't dig into it to help impact. But I think that it's something that could aid his philosophy if he looked into it, either by incorporating more culturally diverse music or having discussions about culture and what the student has faced in their life, and being able to help that shape more people that will change the world. I think that culturally relevant pedagogy would really fall in line with his philosophy if he was willing to dive into it, and I definitely want to incorporate it more than he did in his philosophy, I would like to be very similar to what Dr. Gergel incorporated, that she wants to bring in multiple perspectives, and she wants to know her students not by making assumptions, but by having the time to talk about things that have impacted them in their life and have discussions as a class about that. I think Dr. Johnson also realizes that this is a little bit more difficult to do in the studio setting because we all are a smaller group and we have a community that's very responsive to each other, and there really aren't a lot of negative interactions, and he sees this more as a public school issue than a studio issue. And I don't think that's the best approach to take. It can very well be a collegiate issue, and it's something that we still need to address at this level because people are still people and they still bring things to the table that we have to consider. As far as personal growth goes, Dr. Johnson does realize himself as a lifelong learner, and he knows that if he ever were to say that he had learned all that he needs to know, then he's immediately cutting himself off to being the best teacher that he could be. He realizes that we're all in this together and wants students to know that he's right in there with them and he is equal among them, that he's also there to learn, and he realizes that he can learn from his students just as much as we learn from him. He also realizes that we're surviving in an environment that doesn't appreciate music as much as it should, and that the fight is bigger than us, but that we play a role in helping people understand the importance of music, and that that's a way that we can change the world. I agree with these things. I don't necessarily want to say that the fight is bigger than us, even though I do recognize that there are a lot of things that go into appreciating music and helping it survive in the schools, but more so that we are a part of making that change, and we all have a role in showing the importance of music. So I think if we take on the approach that the fight is bigger than us, it's a ceiling that we don't want to break, whereas if we have the mindset that we are a part of this and that we have the responsibility and the ability to make a positive change for the world through music. Overall, Dr. Johnson said the most important part of his philosophy, as I mentioned in the beginning, is practicing what you preach. He feels that this is the most important thing to incorporate into his teaching as a studio professor and an educator in general. And I really enjoyed listening to what he had to say about his philosophy, and definitely agree with some aspects and believe that there are some aspects that I would like to improve upon compared to him in my own teaching philosophy, especially culturally relevant pedagogy. And as someone who is striving to teach teachers and teach in the public school setting, unlike a studio setting that's specifically focused on an instrument, I think I'll have more opportunities to incorporate that. And so I think that that is something that can benefit my teaching philosophy, thinking about those ways that I can improve upon that.